excited to chat with everybody about researching your historic properties. My name is Suzi Taylor. I've been a reference archivist with the Wyoming State Archives for almost a little over 20 years now. So it's been a wonderful journey, and the best part is getting to share information with folks like you. So let's go and get started. So one of my favorite building research quotes is by Winston Churchill: "We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us." And I think this is something that many of us in the historic community find to be so true. And every building has a story. I don't have to tell you that, you already know. But sharing that story and figuring out what that story is and how it can take us and our communities into the future can sometimes be a little challenging. So hopefully this little webinar will help. So where do we find these stories? You can find them in libraries, you can find them by talking to your neighbors, but my personal favorite, obviously, is here in the archives. We did put together a researching historic properties guide a while back, and I'll drop this this link into the chat here real quick. If you guys have an interest in it. It's pretty basic, but it's similar to what we'll be talking about today. Where do we start? Often we start where we're at. So I always encourage people to start by making a list of what you already know. You're probably going to know either an address or a legal description, or maybe both, of the property you're looking at, and you may know one or two of the previous owners or uses of the building. And then I also encourage you to start with a hypothesis or some sort of question. You know, what do you want to know? We get a lot of people that come and go, "Hey, I just bought a historic property and I want to know everything there is to know about it." And that can be kind of a daunting question and a hard one to really answer, because, you know, are you wanting to know the year of construction and the architect, the previous owner, changes that were made to the structure? Are you just wanting photographs? Do you want to know interesting stories? Do you want to know why your sewer ties into your neighbors and not directly into the city's sewer? You know, all sorts of things can come up. And so knowing the question that you actually want to answer can be really helpful in guiding your research. There is a little bit of a difference between researching urban versus rural properties. Urban properties are usually a little easier to track on those build dates. There's a few more resources, and you're more likely to find photos. Rural, you get to talk to more people. Go talk to your neighbors, see what kind of local knowledge you have. But you may also find that there's more undocumented movement of the buildings. So somebody may say, "Oh yeah, you know, that barn used to be one of the barracks up at Hart Mountain," and documenting how and when that happened can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. Rural properties also see a little bit less change in ownership sometimes, which can be nice because it can help guide your research into some of those families and persons. But first, let's start with some ways that you can find information about urban residential properties. I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen, but this particular photo is labeled as a typical Rollins residence. I don't know where you guys are hiding all these wonderful houses, but I love this one. So one of the first places to start with urban residential properties is probably in the county clerk land records. Now, to do this, you will need to know your legal descriptions. So you'll need to know a block and a lot. You can go to your county assessor's website or to their office, and they can usually get that for you. But what the land records will tell you is who owned what and when. We've got an example over here on the right of the one of the abstract pages, and so you can see the lot numbers. You can see a block number up at the top, and it will tell you the name of the grantor. A grantor is the person who has it. The grantee is the person who gets it. There's also a character of an instrument, so what type of document is it? In this case, there's a whole lot of warranty deeds or war deeds, and that just means it's a sale of the property. But there's also some mortgages. There's some affidavits. There's some liens on the property. You never know what you'll find. Another really great resource are the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps. The Sanborn Fire Insurance Company created a number of these maps across the country from kind of the late 1800s up through at least the mid 1900s. And they are wonderful resources for building research. They were created to help the insurance company track fire risks and write better policies. You know, if you know what's going on around a property, you know how likely it is to be damaged by fire. And so they have these wonderfully detailed maps that show what a building was constructed of, how it was being used, what was around it. On this image to the right, you can see all of the blocks in a city. This happens to be Cheyenne, about 1886. And this is kind of the western edge of what's now downtown. And yellow buildings are wood construction. Red is brick. Blue is stonework. And sometimes there's a weird kind of pucey gray color, and that's fireproof construction. But as you can see on here, there's a whole bunch of houses and dwellings. Those are usually labeled with a D. And it will show both houses and then also outbuildings. So along alleys, especially, you can see garages, carriage houses, sheds. And then you'll also see commercial buildings. So in this case, between Reed and Bent, just north of 16th Street, you've got a feedlot, and I can't remember, it looks like a lumber yard as well. These maps were created every few years, and you can kind of track the footprint of some of the buildings over time, and that can help you date when a building was constructed. You know, if it's not on one map, but it's on the next one, you know, it was built sometime in between there. You can also see changes to the footprint. Did they add an addition? Did they add a porch? Was the building torn down and totally replaced? But they do have some limitations. You know, these fire insurance maps weren't made for every single building that was ever built. They centered on large population centers. So most of the major cities in Wyoming, and you know, I'm including, you know, places like Wheatland and Torrington in that, you know, it's they'll have maps like this, but there is a limited date range. Library of Congress has a wonderful set of these maps that are in color, but there's an additional set that are just in black and white, and I'll drop these links in the chat for you as well. Let's see. So after Sanborn maps, you might also want to look at city directories. I like to call them the gossipy cousin of the telephone books, because they can tell you more about an individual than just that they lived at a certain address and had a certain phone number. City directories usually include what we would think of as the white page sections, so alphabetical by a person's name. There was also a yellow pages section that is for businesses and kind of organized by their function. But for our purposes, The most important is the reverse directory by address. And over on the right-hand side, you can see an example of that. This is really great for tracking ownership and or residency at a certain address. You can begin to kind of build a timeline of who was living at that address and when. It can also help narrow build dates. So once again, just like the Sanborn maps, if it's not in one directory, but it shows up in the next one, you can be pretty sure that it was probably constructed within the two. City directories are sometimes a little bit behind the curve. So, you know, a house can be built one year and it may not show up until, you know, the next year's telephone book, or I'm sorry, city directory. You can also track some of the rental use and apartment splits, especially here in Cheyenne, and I'm sure it happened probably up in Casper as well. During World War II, there was a huge housing shortage. And with the increased number of war workers and military personnel coming in, a lot of people would create apartments in their basement or in outbuildings. And you can show, or you can see that reflected in the city directories, because you'll start to see half addresses or A's and B's. So that's kind of nice. The city directories also list who's living at that address, not necessarily who owns the property. So if you see a change in names pretty much every year, it's a good chance that you're looking at a rental use rather than an owner use. County assessors and treasurer's records can be incredibly helpful. Tracking tax assessments and jumps in that valuation can give you a clue as to when construction happened. In the last few years, the county assessors have done property research folks a huge favor by putting their assessment maps up online. So in many counties across Wyoming, you can go to the assessor's website, access their maps, and find out what the city has, or I'm sorry, what the county has on file about a particular property. Over on the right here, this is from the Albany County Assessors. The square up in the top is actually the Laramie Plains Museum. And over to the right of that map, you can see some of the details. If you click on property detail, you get the lower left table, and that gives you a little bit about, you know, not only the street address, but also the legal description of the property, how many square feet is being assessed. And below that, you have a little bit more about the building and what they are, alleging. In this case, you know, you do have to take it with a grain of salt. They say this house was built in 1900. It wasn't, but so it's, you gotta take it with a grain of salt. If you live in Laramie County or are researching a property in Laramie County, beware of the 1916 or 1917 build year. That is just denoting that they don't know what year it is, and they have to put some year in there. There are some buildings that legitimately were built in 1916 or 1917, but just know that in certain towns, there's certain years that might be a little sketchy. So you're going to want another source. Also on this page, you can find sketches and photos of the property that were taken by the assessor's office during their valuation. The bottom right here shows a an example. And this is actually for the building across the street. They didn't have anything for the house itself. But you can see how things are assessed, and sometimes it'll have when additions were made and have that dated, and we'll see that later in the presentation. City engineers are also a wonderful resource. The city engineer often has to sign off on building plans. Sometimes they keep them, sometimes they don't, but it's always good to check with them. They also may have records of building permits that were issued, and that can help you date your buildings as well. Here at the State Archives, we do have some building plans for Cheyenne and Sheridan. But the rest of the state's a little harder for us to find in the collection. Newspapers. This picture didn't show up, but I'm assuming you guys know what newspapers look like. The Wyoming Newspaper Project, which can be found at wyomingNewspapers.org. They are a wonderful source for local news. Newspapers often, especially for early homes, reported on who was building what and when. Some of the larger residential buildings in town will often have a kind of a visual walkthrough or a verbal walkthrough of the building. Sometimes you can find notices about when a building is being sold or rented, and you can also often find more about the people that were associated with the home. Photos are also incredibly helpful. This particular picture came from the family that lived in this house. This is the old Richardson house here in Cheyenne. If you were to walk in the picture about a block to the right, you'd hit the Capitol building. This building was sold to the state and actually demolished to make room for the Hathaway building. And all of the family papers and photos came to the State Archives. But you can see the transformation of this house over the years. It saw many, many additions. As you can see, it's a little eclectic. But definitely check under family names or individual names of owners or people who lived at that address. So let's switch over to commercial and business research. It's similar to urban residential, but there's a few more kind of tricks up the researcher's sleeve when you're looking at commercial and business buildings. So once again, you do have the Sanborn maps. In this case, Sanborn maps can be even more useful because they will tell you exactly how a building was being used during a particular period. Sometimes even to the point where it'll tell you that upstairs was offices and downstairs was a candy store, or you know, it's being heated by a boiler, or you know, it has a coal boiler in the basement. It can also sometimes show you where the divisions within the building were, if the space was divided up. Just like the residential properties, county clerk records are incredibly helpful. So are city directories and the county assessors and treasurers. City engineers sometimes, once again, have building plans or permits, and you do often find a lot of photos of the businesses and commercial property. In the newspapers, you sometimes find too much information about your buildings or about the shops that were in there, and sometimes it can be hard to kind of weed through that, but it's usually worth the worth the work. Another thing that you might want to check that's kind of like newspapers, but school yearbooks and other local publications that sold advertising are a wonderful source of information. To be a Cheyenne High School yearbook from about 1957. And the yearbook staff had a great time going around town and taking pictures with buildings and businesses. And some of these businesses are in parts of town that haven't been as well documented by photographs as some of the other parts. And so these photos can add quite a bit to the research. Community histories are also a wonderful place to look for the history of buildings. Sometimes, rather than just looking for the Deming block or the Deming building, maybe you take a deeper look into the businesses that were there, and in there it says, oh, in 1887, so and so built this building, and it was used for this or that. Rural properties are also similar but slightly different beast. They can be, as we discussed, they can be a little bit harder than the urban properties because there usually aren't as many resources. But what is available, we have county clerk land records. Here's another example of an abstract page. So this one, once again, is going to tell you what section. When you're in town, you're working with blocks and lots and addition and neighborhood additions and whatnot. In rural settings, you're going to be looking at township range section and then what portion of that section. And once you have that legal description, all sorts of information starts to come your way. Also, definitely look into the community histories, especially longtime owners, managers, and employees. If you're looking at the history of a ranch, start looking into, maybe histories about, if it was a sheep operation, look into the history of local sheep operations. Sometimes some of the best little nuggets of information are really buried in there. Another source that's really great for rural properties are the BLM GLO land patent database and the tract books. So these are federal records that document homestead claims. BLM is, of course, Bureau of Land Management. They were put in charge of all of the land that had not been claimed as of, I can't remember, I think it was sometime in the late 20s or early 30s. And so that's where a lot of our BLM property, federal property, comes from today. GLO is Government Land Office, and they were in charge of transferring federal property to individuals. Up on the top, you can see a screenshot of what the BLM GLO land patent database is. Be warned that this database is only for homesteaders who were able to prove up on their land. If for some reason they weren't able to do that and the patent wasn't awarded, it will not show up in this database. But that's where these tract books come in. So in the lower right is an example of one of the tract books for here in Cheyenne, or I'm sorry, here in Wyoming, not Cheyenne. The tract books were the kind of like the abstract books that we saw in the county clerk's office. They tracked who was claiming what on what property. So you'd go into the local government land office and say, hey, I would like to homestead on this piece of property. And they put your name down in this book, and what date you'd come in and filed for that. And then if you weren't able to complete the time necessary or the requirements necessary to earn your patent, they could go back in this book and mark it out, and then the next person could come in and put their name on that piece of property. People canceled or relinquished their homesteads for a number of reasons. Usually it was because they just found it too difficult. Sometimes people died. Sometimes they just lost interest. But it wasn't always a simple road from for the homesteaders to prove up on property. And so on some of these rural properties where the homestead was relinquished, there may have been buildings that had already been built when the property was relinquished, and those buildings would remain for the next person. So this can give you an idea of, kind of who was involved, if it's looking like the person who got the homestead wasn't the one that that built the building. So let's talk about a couple of special cases. The Depression era federal projects are kind of interesting. So these are NYA, CWA, CCC, WPA, and all the other alphabet soup organizations that were created during the Depression. A lot of them provided monetary help for construction of public works. So these are structures in parks, community centers, government buildings. The picture on the right here is the North Casper Clubhouse. There's also, there was work done in parks for picnic structures. There were bridges and overpasses, and the Supreme Court building here in Cheyenne was a federal project, and those projects can also have additional records that can say when building was started, how much it cost, who was the architect, and it can really help to answer a whole bunch of your questions. And we do have copies of some of those records here at the State Archives on microfilm. Let's see, rural school buildings. This is one of the fun ones that we get a lot here at the State Archives. People will ask about, a school building that they drive by often, or that they remember their mom or their grandma going to. And sometimes they can be a little bit tricky. A lot of these rural school buildings were not built on foundations, and they were meant to be moved. And so tracking how and when they were moved and to where can be a little interesting. And also tracking, the years that they were in use. County Superintendent of School records are some of our best resources for this. The Superintendent of Schools is a office that no longer exists, but at the time they published, or they didn't really publish, they compiled annual reports about each of the school districts that were within their county, and sometimes there were tens of little rural community schools. Boundary board minutes from the superintendent's office are also wonderful. So those are, the board was in charge of determining, which kids would go to what school. And so they would create maps. They would create these school districts, and they would also often say when a school was being moved. Usually it was just to another part of the school section. But sometimes it would go from maybe the Fergusons had 6 kids, and once 3 of them aged out, well, now the Millers who had 4 kids that were a little younger, maybe the schoolhouse would be moved towards them. The county superintendent of schools also had teachers directories for a lot of these schools. So if you're wanting to know, who were the teachers and when was the school in operation, those teachers directories can be incredibly helpful, as can the school board minutes. They'll often discuss needs for a new school, or if a school building just doesn't have a large enough population to support it. They might also talk about that. They'll often also talk about challenges for the building. So if the building is damaged, if the building needs repair, if it needs an addition, often the school board minutes will mention things like that. Bridges. Bridges are also a wonderful structure that we sometimes need to find history of. County clerks' road and bridge records are by far the best place to start. That's usually will answer most of your questions. When it was built, who authorized it, how much it cost, if there were any right of ways that needed to be cleared, that type of stuff. But sometimes it still leaves some gaps in knowledge. So then you have to go farther. Checking local maps can sometimes help you date the construction of a map. Local histories, of course, and then definitely newspapers. So let's look at a quick example, and then we'll take some questions. So the Eidelman building here that you see has been a landmark here in Cheyenne for many, many, many years. When the Capitol building was being remodeled, the state purchased it from the Schrader family and used it for the governor's office. And since then, it has continued to be used by state offices, mainly A&I, the Administration and Information Department. But it's a really neat building, so let's take a closer look at it. So what do we know? Well, we know that we know the address, 2323 Cary Avenue, and that it's at the corner of 24th and Cary. We know it's currently owned by the state. We know it's formerly owned by the Schrader's Funeral Home. It appears to be Victorian, and it appears to have an addition possibly mid-20th century. So what do we want to know? We want to know when it was built, who has owned it, and what was the original footprint, and when were those additions built. And we're going to give ourselves some bonus points for figuring out some historical importance of the building. So first, let's start with finding a legal description. So we have a street address, but a lot of those county clerk records are by the legal description, and so we need to figure out what lot and block this property was on. So we can go to the county assessor's office. We can also go to the Sanborn maps. Here on the right, you see an index page for 1923 in Cheyenne. I like to start with the kind of some of the later maps and work my way backward. And that way I can see where the building is and if it exists, and then work my way back until it disappears. Let's see. So in this case, we are looking right about here, which is on page 19. So Central Park is here, which is now the Supreme Court and the Barrett building where I'm at, and the Capitol building is just right across 24th. So we are looking just right on the north part of that, page 19L. And so here's a better picture of that. So if this is the Capitol building, we are looking right at this corner. Hopefully you guys can see my cursor here. And it's got a big 169 on it, and that's because that is original city block 169. So we're getting closer. Oh. And so if we go to page 19, we can find our big L again. And here is block 169. And if we zoom in a little bit, we can find our building here on that northwest corner. And it has a D for dwelling. It's pink with a couple of yellow porches. So it's brick construction with a couple of yellow porches. There's also a number 2 up here in the corner, which means it's a 2-story. And there's a carriage house or some sort of outbuilding behind it. Now, on the map, it's a little hard to see where the lots are. So if we extend those lines, we can tell that there are 4 lots in this. Lots are almost always numbered from northeast, and then they come around to southeast. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In this case, we're going to be looking at lots 3 and 4. So now we have a legal description. Original City of Cheyenne, block 169, lots 3 and 4. Okay. Here's a couple of other examples. So here we've got Thermopolis in 1907 that's showing Hot Springs State Park and some of the amenities that were there, like Star Plunge and the the sanitarium, as well as the state bathhouse. And then over on the right, we've got a picture of Rawlins in 1920, and you can see downtown here off of Main. You can see how densely packed these buildings are, and that the majority of them are brick construction. Once again, that's pink. Blue is stone, and yellow is dwelling. Let's see. Okay, so now that we have a legal description, we can go into the county clerk records. In the last few years, a lot of the county clerks have digitized their land records, but most of them are behind a paywall unless you go down to the clerk's office. We do also have copies of early land records up through, usually from the start of the county up through about 1965, 1970, depending on the county. So let's look at block 169, lot 3 and 4. So once again, here's an example of that page. And if we look in here, we can find up at the top, the 3rd row down, Union Pacific Railroad Company to R.D. and J.M. Carey. That would be Robert D. and Joseph M. Carey, who later both become governors. But at the time, let's see, this was a warranty deed. So it was a sale of the property from the UP Railroad to the Careys. The next 2 columns are where it's recorded. So if we go to Book J, page 131, we can find a copy of the actual deed. The next 3 columns are the date of the instruments. So the date of the deed is April 18th of 1879. And then the next is the date of the filing. So that's when they took the deed to the county clerk's office and when it was recorded in this book, which is October 24th of 1879. That is, a little bit of a difference. Sometimes it could be years difference. Usually if that happens, it's because somebody was trying to clear title before a sale and they went, oh, hey, I forgot to take this deed in. We need to file it now. And these books are usually filled out somewhat chronologically by the date of the filing. And so if you don't find what you're looking for, kind of keep looking for your lots, and sometimes some of those missing documents will come up. So in this case, this property was sold for $140 to the Careys. If we go down kind of towards the bottom, you see another instance where lots 3 and 4 are in the right-hand column, or I'm sorry, in the left-hand column. And then it says 3 and Louisa D. Carey. So that 3 means we go up to line 3, which is RD and JM Carey. So we now have father-son Carey plus Louisa D. Carey. And we show that that is being sold to Max Eidelman. Once again, it's a warranty deed, so it's a sale. It's recorded book 47, page 351. The sale was May 9th of 1887 and was recorded May 31st of 1887 for $4,500. That's a significant increase in value from $140 in 1879 to, lost my place here, $4,500 in 1887. So then we can come down and look and see what happened after that. So we can see another 3 and 4. Once again, we've got 22. So we go up to line 22. So we've got Max Eidelman is transferring property to Fanny Eidelman. Once again, we have a warranty deed. We got the book and page where it's recorded. So this is June of 1907. And in this case, we've got this 1 and C, which means it's $1 in consideration. In order for a real estate transfer to happen, money has to be exchanged. If it's within a family, or sometimes, you know, part of another business agreement, sometimes it'll only be $1 that changes hands, and it's a usually a symbolic monetary amount. So in this case, $1 in consideration probably means that Max is transferring it to Fanny, but we don't really know who Fanny is yet. So we'll go here, and so that's kind of a summary of what we found. So if we keep going down, we find a little bit more. In July of 1920, Fannie mortgages and then sells the lots to Charles Rigdon for $3,500. I'm sorry, $35,000. September of 21, Thomas H. Miller Securities puts a lien against the house for unpaid debt. June of 24, the city puts a lien on the lot for street improvements. So these are usually sidewalks, or usually it's sidewalks. So we know about 1924, there's some sidewalk work done. May of 25, city puts a lien on the lots for unpaid taxes. So Mr. Rigdon's not doing so hot here. 25 to 26, the lots are sold for unpaid taxes back to Fanny Eidelman. August of 1926, Sam Eidelman purchased the lots from Fanny for $1 in consideration. So once again, if we didn't already guess that there was a family connection, this $1 in consideration would probably clue us in. Keep going forward, we've got December 31st of 43, Wesley A. Schrader and Ux, or however that's pronounced, it essentially means and others, purchased the lots for $16,000. And almost immediately, he takes out a mortgage on the property for $10,000. Now, usually when you see a mortgage on a property, it means that either somebody's not doing so hot, or they're getting ready to build or remodel. And so June of 1951, the bank releases the mortgage. Chances are this was probably a remodel in 43. In February of 60, Marvin Schrader purchases the lot from Wesley Schrader for $10 in consideration. So probably just a familial transfer. And he also mortgages them for $106,000. So this is a really great place to start looking for that addition that we see in the pictures. And then in September of 1980, Don Schrader purchases the lot from Marvin Schrader for, once again, $10 in consideration, and also mortgages them for $300,000. So once again, we're probably looking at either another addition or a major renovation in 80. So what have we learned so far? We learned that the property was purchased from UP Railroad by the Careys as an investment, sold for a large profit to Max Eidelman. He passed it down to his daughter Fanny, who sold it to Charles Rigdon because of financial hardships. Rigdon didn't pay his property tax, and Fanny Eidelman was able to buy it back from the city for back taxes. She passes it down to Sam Eidelman. In 1943, it's sold to the Schrader family, probably remodeled, possibly remodeled, passed down to Marvin Schrader in 1960, also either remodeled or a major addition, and then passed down to Don Schrader in 1980 with another possible remodel or addition. And then we also know that it was sold to the state of Wyoming about 2014. And we know from, we'll call it oral history, that it was remodeled and served as the governor's office during capital renovation and now houses portions of A&I. But who were these people? So we can take a look at city directories, local histories, newspapers, photographs, the federal census, find a grave, all sorts of other places to find out just who these people were. And the Eidelmans were a merchant family here in town. They were also Jewish. You can probably tell that by the headstone for Max Eidelman up there. And Max and his wife Fanny had one daughter. Max died fairly early in 1913. Yeah, so this is their daughter. And then over here on the right, you can see a little bit about who Max was. The far right-hand corner is a picture of a city directory. And you can see Max Eidelman is listed as president of the Eidelman Brothers Company, and his residence is 2323 Ferguson, and his wife is Mrs. Fanny Eidelman. So this is kind of an example of that, a little bit more detailed information you can get out of those city directories. If we were to go farther, we could go and look up Eidelman Brothers, which happens to be right above, and see what they do. So Max Eidelman is president, Sam Eidelman is vice president and treasurer, and P. Jacob Golf is secretary, and they are wholesale wines, liquor, cigars, and tobacco downtown at 2222 West 16th. If you're familiar with Cheyenne, that is now the Crown Bar. And then down in this lower right-hand corner is the Schrader's family and mortuary team in front of the Schrader's funeral home. They purchased the house and, as I mentioned, operated it as a funeral home, which explains the additions that were put on. But we still haven't answered the question, when was the house built? So we got to look at it a little bit closer. So as we go through the Sanborn maps, we see that it's not there in 1883, it's not there in 86, 1890, it's an empty lot, but 1894, there's a house and carriage house. And then we can continue to go through the years and see the building and how the porches kind of change over time and how the carriage house changes. And then all of a sudden, the 1931-1960 map shows a major remodel. So from the maps, we can guess that the house was built between 1890 and 1894. And then there was a major remodel by 1960. Why the Sanborn map is dated 31 to 60 is the Sanborn Company stopped making new base maps in 1931, and they started just sending out essentially paper stickers to update your maps. So we don't know when this map was created between 31 and 60, but we know it was between 31 and 60. We can also look at the newspapers and start to see 1892, Max is going to Chicago for some bric-a-brac for his new mansion on North Ferguson. Ferguson became Cary Avenue. 10 cars of pressed bricks. They think it's going to be completed by March of 93. And then here is a little bit more about some of the fixtures. There's also some examples of places you can find those newspapers. WyomingNewspapers.org is probably our best bet here in Wyoming. Tax rolls. We can also go to the tax rolls and see jumps in value. So between 1894 and 1895. If we go to the county assessor's website, the modern county assessor's website, we see not only the house, but they also have a sketch, and it shows where they believe the additions are. So there is a 1962 edition, a couple of 1962 editions, which match up to what we saw before, a 1953 edition. There's also an edition that they have here. I believe that says 1953 as well. But once again, year built, it says 1897. And if we go back, we know by 1895, and 1892, 93, the house was under construction. So that 1897 is a little sketchy. But we can put it all together and find out a little bit more about what this house was. We think it was built 1892, 1893, owned by the Max Eidelman and family from 87 to 43. Then it was a funeral home from 43 to about 2014, and then the state of Wyoming 2014 to the present. And we can see those additions. So historical importance, sorry, I'm kind of rushing through these here at the end so I can get to some questions. Bonus points, there are tons of photographs of this house, and we can see how it did change or didn't change over the years. So the Eidelmans were a very prominent family, and there seems to be quite a bit of ties to the local Jewish community. There's stories of the local Jewish congregation gathering in the third floor of the house. It was also used for a time as a governor's residence before the official residence was built. And there's a little bit there. So some quick tips for historical research: document your sources, look outside that box, and ask everybody you know. And once again, document your sources so you know where these things came from. I can't stress that enough. And yeah, so with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions if you guys have any.
Okay, we have one question from earlier in the chat from Heidi. Where can I find the city directories? Are they digital?
Some. Ancestry.com has a number of city directories available on their website. Obviously, Ancestry is a subscription-based site, but usually if you go to your local library or here to the archives, we can get you on the library version of Ancestry, and we can look at those. I would also go check out your local library. They often have copies of city directories. We have some from around the state, but if you're over in Laramie, I know the Laramie Plains Museum has a wonderful set of local directories. I'm sure there's other museums around the state too that have theirs.
And for everyone, please feel free to type your questions in chat and we'll get to them in the order we received them. Rain Cheyenne has a question. What research approach would you suggest for archaeologists with minimal information about an abandoned rural building in some state of ruin when finding the construction date and last date of use before abandonment of the most importance?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So I would start with researching the property itself, figure out who owned the property and when, and maybe do some work looking into them and their their businesses. I would also definitely contact the local historical society and see if there's any locals that might be familiar with the property. Rural properties are really, really hard to date, and especially, yeah, it's hard. You're gonna have to dig, ask everybody you know, and then yeah, definitely look into who was using the property and when.
Thank you so much, Susie. Are there any other questions you all have for Susie? We have a couple of minutes still, so feel free to put your questions in the chat.
And you guys are always welcome to reach out to me. The State Archives is open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. You can definitely call us. You can email us. We will do our best to help you find whatever sources are out there in our collection, or recommend other places to go and look.